You were never meant to sleepwalk through life. Yet from the moment you opened your eyes, the world did everything it could to sing you a lullaby of randomness. Every traffic light you happened to catch, every stranger's sentence that finished the thought in your head, every song lyric that echoed the worry you hadn't voiced. Coincidence, they said, pure chance. But chance begins to wobble the first time you notice how precisely the dominoes fall. It's a tiny crack at first, a clock flashing 11:11 the instant you form a question, or a friend calling seconds after their face pops into your mind. The crack widens, and a suspicion seeps through. Perhaps reality isn't a slot machine after all. Perhaps it's a conversation. Think back to the moments that refuse to stay silent. You're searching for a long-lost receipt, give up, and scroll your phone. There it is, the exact purchase date on an unrelated social media memory. You dismiss it, yet an hour later a client mentions that same date as the deadline you forgot. A pattern begins to braid itself through unrelated moments, stitching a line of thread too bright to ignore. These are the cracks in coincidence. The fissures where the tidy story of a mechanical universe splits and an older story begins whispering through. It is older than science, older than scripture, older than fear. It says the world is alive, and it has been talking to you all along. The first thing that changes is your eyesight, though nothing about your eyes changes at all. Street numbers, phone digits, license plates, suddenly they behave like bold print in an otherwise gray paragraph. You notice the twin fours on the back of a truck, then glimpse them again on the cashier's badge, then on the apartment buzzer you pressed that evening. You can practically hear some cosmic stagehand clearing their throat, waiting for you to react. Ignore it and the nudges grow louder. Acknowledge it and they rearrange themselves into guidance. Either way, neutrality is no longer an option. Yet in those first weeks of noticing, self-doubt hunts you like a shadow. You ask, am I cherry-picking data? Isn't the brain wired to find patterns that aren't there? That objection is a useful gatekeeper. Only sincere curiosity gets past it. So you test the field. You set a silent challenge. Show me a blue feather if this job is right for me. The next morning, a stranger on the train opens a novel, and the cover art is a single sapphire plume. Probability can't quite explain away the electric feeling in your gut. Something heard you. Something answered. Observe carefully what happens next. Novel coincidences are exciting, but sustained dialogue is transformative. Miss a turn on the highway and discover the organic market you've been searching for all month. Clean out an old drawer and find the exact amount of cash you need for an overdue bill. The universe speaks through logistics because it knows you respect practicality. It engineers serendipity at the level of street corners and Wi-Fi passwords, because that's where your skeptical mind lives. And the more you notice, the more the scaffolding of randomness bends. None of this violates physics. It stretches your definition of it. If particles can exist as probabilities until observed, why can't events? Your attention collapses possibility into actuality. Synchronicity is the afterimage of that collapse, the subtle glow around reality that proves something was watching with you. We call it fate when it protects us and luck when it rewards us, but both words are clumsy. What's actually happening is participation. Your interior world and the exterior world are performing an intricate dance, and every coincidence is a footstep hitting the floor in perfect time. Remember childhood before vocabulary caged wonder. A dandelion seed floating past carried a secret message. A cloud shaped like a dragon felt personal. Back then, you didn't need a PhD to accept that the sky might wink at you. Then the syllabus arrived. Gravity is reliable, magic is not, and the adult world applauds predictability. So you filed away the living universe as a fairy tale. Now the tale is knocking on your apartment door, not with fairies, but with precisely timed emails, repeating integers, and strangers who know things they shouldn't. The real shock isn't that messages arrive. It's that they've never stopped. While you label them coincidence, they patiently queued up, waiting for the day you'd grow curious again. And the moment you do, reality responds like a friend who's been dying to talk. Tea kettles whistle the second you realize you're thirsty. Billboards answer the question you muttered under your breath. A podcast pauses itself at the sentence that matters most. It's uncanny, but it's also strangely intimate, as though the universe has been keeping notes on your life the way a best friend would. Of course, intimacy brings responsibility. Once you suspect reality is aware of you, you can't treat your days like disposable minutes. You begin showing up differently, more alert, less cynical. The morning commute transforms into a scavenger hunt for signals. The grocery store becomes an oracle's chamber, every aisle number a potential breadcrumb. You find yourself in a subtle but constant state of listening, and listening is the birthplace of every revolution in consciousness. What makes these cracks in coincidence so dangerous to the established order is their simplicity. They require no guru, no gadget, no subscription, only your willingness to pay attention. That is revolutionary power masquerading as ordinary life. You could keep scrolling, keep shrugging, keep telling yourself it's all random. But you feel the crack widening, don't you? A hidden architecture is revealing itself brick by brick, and with every brick you spot, your story upgrades from pawn to player. Soon you'll wonder how you ever believed the board was empty in the first place. Your first glimpse that the universe might be alive felt exhilarating, a secret handshake with something vast. Then, almost immediately, doubt returned, like a teacher confiscating a toy. That reflex isn't a personal flaw. It was installed. From kindergarten worksheets to late-night news crawls, culture has one priority: convince you that only approved forms of meaning are real. Every other signal, especially the subtle nudge of synchronicity, must be silenced. School comes first. Remember how wonder fit inside you before the bell rang? You could sense when a friend would phone, feel the mood of a tree. The curriculum had no box for that. It wanted answers, not questions, and only certain answers earned gold stars. 2 plus 2 equaled 4. Gravity pulled apples downward. History marched in straight lines. Anything slipping between workbook lines was labeled distraction. Praise for conformity turned your attention outward and your intuition inward. Science class sharpened the edges. The scientific method is noble, but it's also a gatekeeper, admitting only what can be repeated under fluorescent lights. Synchronicity refuses to perform on demand. It needs context and emotion. So the lab deemed it unmeasurable, and therefore unreal. You absorb the verdict as self-censorship. If I can't prove this feeling, I shouldn't trust it. While school built walls, religion often topped them with barbed wire. Many faiths began as ecstatic dialogues with the cosmos, but doctrine ossified. Mystical experience threatened hierarchy. If ordinary people could receive direct guidance, why obey a priest? So sacred conversation was routed through sanctioned channels. Anything outside that fence was suspect, perhaps sinful. You might have felt a surge of wonder during a sunrise service, but sermons warned that visions beyond Scripture were temptation. Then mass media arrived, spoon-feeding doubt in high definition. Sitcoms portrayed the intuitive character as the punchline, the conspiracy believer as the messy-haired crank. News anchors delivered statistics like commandments: 94% chance of rain, 23% rise in GDP. Numbers stripped of any mystical aroma. Commercials mastered insecurity, teaching you that comfort comes from purchasing signals, not interpreting them. Social expectation sealed the spell. Families want reassurance that their children fit. Colleagues need proof you're serious. Announce at brunch that the universe talks to you through repeating numbers and watch forks freeze midair. Over time, fear of that micro-rejection trains you to self-edit. You shrink the story, calling synchronicity weird luck, as though linguistic downgrading could make the phenomenon behave. Notice how elegantly the system enforces itself. No shadowy villain is needed. Your inner critic does the policing, armed with words like confirmation bias and pareidolia. Those concepts are useful when applied with nuance, yet culture wields them like fly swatters, flattening mystery before it can hatch. Advertising flips the equation. Marketers understand resonance. Flash an archetype, red sports car, limited time sale, and millions feel the tug of collective desire. that is engineered synchronicity, a hijacking of pattern seeking for profit. Culture sneers at natural synchronicity while monetizing artificial versions. Algorithms brag when a celebrity posts the exact shoes you considered yesterday. Yet when the cosmos aligns your path, you're told to calm down. Conditioning layers pile up: institutional, religious, commercial, social. By adulthood, the reflex to doubt is automatic. Experience a sparkling alignment, and before wonder can spread its wings, the inner auditor stamps irrelevant. The gap between event and allowed interpretation becomes painful, and that pain is no accident. It's product design. A populace trained to distrust direct perception buys solutions to fill the ache. Endless scrolling, pharmaceuticals, branded mindfulness apps promising serenity in 6 weeks. How do you unlearn what civilization so meticulously taught? Begin by identifying the voice of authority when it pops up in your head. Whose vocabulary is it? Your third-grade teacher, a doctrinal elder, a memes with facts infographic? Once you see the puppet strings, you can lay them down. Doubt can still serve, but as a consultant, not a jailer. Next, rehabilitate curiosity. Ask small questions. What if that number sequence is personal? What if this detour has purpose? Curiosity is immune to ridicule because it claims no certainty. It simply explores. Exploration reawakens perception. The brain's reticular activating system, once trained to filter out anomalies, begins highlighting them again. Patterns bloom where boredom used to lurk. Most importantly, creates silence. Conditioning thrives on noise. Streaming playlists, podcast queues, group chats fill the margins where synchronicity would write its messages. Will you carve out quiet, unplugged walks, device-free dinners? You invite the subtle voice back. At first it whispers cautiously. With patience it grows confident. As you practice, an inversion occurs. Instead of doubting intuitive hits, you start doubting narratives that belittle them. You question why textbooks ignore quantum entanglement's philosophical implications, why sacred texts emphasize obedience over personal revelation, why news outlets treat anomalies as punchlines. Doubt realigns as discernment, slicing illusion rather than wonder. Remember that algorithms are not neutral librarians. They're sales reps in disguise. Each thumbs up and scroll pause trains a digital mirror to feed you content that cements your worldview. If that worldview equates mystery with madness, your feed will serve an endless buffet of ridicule. Failed prophets, debunked psychics, clickbait headlines about crazy coincidences. Explained. The machine curates doubt so skillfully that you seldom notice the fence until you try to climb it. Every time you linger over a skeptical meme, the algorithm tightens another brick in the wall. To slip past that border guard, you don't need to delete your accounts. You need to balance them with analog rituals. Keep a pocket notebook for uncanny moments. Nobody can data mine paper. Trade stories face-to-face, where subtle eye movements convey sincerity better than emojis ever could. Technology is a marvel, but silence, ink, and human presence are still the most encrypted channels for communicating with the universe. Use them, and you'll notice the messages arrive clearer, faster, and with undeniable precision. By now, you glimpse a deeper secret. Institutions mocking synchronicity secretly exploit it. Governments fund remote viewing programs. Corporations invest billions in behavioral prediction. Intelligence agencies map social resonance like storm systems. They know patterns govern human reality. Their strategy isn't to debunk pattern recognition, but to monopolize it. The last thing they want is everyday citizens wielding the same perceptual power without mediation. Unlearning the programming is therefore revolutionary. Each time you trust a sign, you rewrite neural pathways carved by years of dismissal. Communities sprout, forums, book clubs, city meetups, where people trade synchronicity stories like postcard from another dimension. Laughter replaces embarrassment, or replaces shame. What was once fringe becomes practice. The world will still tug you back. A cynical article will label your insight magical thinking. A friend may roll eyes when you cancel plans on a gut feeling. Yet every time you honor the language of coincidence, you forge a thicker thread between inner and outer realms. Months later, that thread is a rope sturdy enough to climb. And the higher you climb, the clearer you see the architecture of doubt designed to keep eyes lowered. When the view finally clicks, something liberates inside you with an audible snap. You realize conditioning built the tension needed for awakening to matter, a bowstring pulled back so awareness could fly. Released, perception reaches farther than it ever could have without resistance. The arrow's target? A life where reality greets you as collaborator, not coincidence. The way it was before the lessons, before the sermons, before the ads. Only now you hold conscious choice. You've pried open the vault of conditioning and the light is pouring in. Now the universe begins speaking in its oldest dialect. Symbols. They litter your path like breadcrumbs, but the most insistent of all are numbers. At first they appear as harmless digital quirks. 11:11 on a clock you haven't glanced at in hours. 222 splashed across a billboard when your playlist pauses. 444 stamped on a receipt for an impulse purchase you almost didn't make. These sequences feel playful, yet behind the whimsy sits an ancient architecture older than alphabets. Numbers are the atoms of meaning. Long before we carved letters into clay, shamans counted drumbeats and tracked the sky's rhythm. Imagine standing at the mouth of a cave lit by torchlight, geometry scrawled on the walls beside antelope hunts and lunar calendars. Those triangles and spirals weren't decorations. They were an operating manual. To the ancients, quantity was quality. 3 wasn't just one more than 2. It carried the essence of birth, life, death. 7 hummed with the cadence of visible planets. 12 echoed lunar cycles. Pythagoras took that torch and showed Greece how vibrating strings map ratios into sound. The same ratios, he insisted, shape planets. His disciples whispered that to know the right numbers was to hold a tuning fork against the cosmos. Modern culture reduced numbers to units of commerce, price tags, launch dates, quarterly earnings. Yet the original resonance never left. That's why a sequence shocks you awake. Somewhere in your marrow, a chord strikes from prehistory and vibrates the bones. The hijacking of numbers for spreadsheets couldn't mute their archetypal tone. It only layered chatter over music. Synchronicity turns the volume knob back up. Start with the most infamous, 11:11. You've probably heard it called a wake-up code, but the label barely scratches its gravity. 2 parallel pillars, side by side, form a gate. Each pillar is a 1, the primal glyph, the individual. Doubled. They mirror each other, inviting the observer to step between. Notice how often 11:11 flashes precisely when you're hesitating. Should I send that message? Quit that job? Board that plane? The alignment urges a choice. Pass through or retreat. That's why the moment is pungent with adrenaline. The universe presents a portal disguised as 4 pixels on an LED screen. Now consider 222, where 1 shouts independence, 2 hums a partnership, twins, polarity, dialogue. Repeating 2s tend to surface when collaboration beckons. Meeting a future business partner in a checkout line, stumbling on a book that completes your half-finished idea. They remind you that creation rarely thrives in isolation. Resonance multiplies in duets. 333 amplifies Trinity. Mind, body, spirit, past, present, future. The moment 333 dances before you, ask which layer of your being needs integration. Maybe you've been exercising and meditating but starving your intellect, or studying until dawn and forgetting to breathe. The universe isn't lecturing, it's holding up a mirror. 444 grounds everything. 4 corners, 4 seasons, 4 elements. Builders love it because it arrives when foundations solidify, signing a lease, launching a website, planting literal roots in a backyard you never thought you'd afford. It whispers, yes, anchor here. Numbers beyond triples gain nuance. 555 heralds upheaval. 666, stripped of dogma, signals material focus. 777 marks mystical alignment. 888 loops infinity. 999 closes the book. Yet sequence alone isn't gospel. Context composes the melody. 555 at a graduation feels different than 555 beside a hospital bed. The universe sings in polyphony. Tonality, timing, and your emotional key signature all decide the message. Interpreting signs is therefore less like decoding Morse and more like jazz improvisation. Listen, feel the chord progression, then riff. Symbols aren't restricted to arithmetic. Animals cross your timeline carrying mythic weight. Ravens croak of prophecy, butterflies of metamorphosis, owls of secret knowledge. Street names echo childhood dreams. Song lyrics answer private prayers. Even technological glitches morph into oracles. The file that refuses to upload might be pausing you long enough to catch a life-altering phone call. Skeptics scoff that meaning is pasted on after the fact, but pay attention to how your body reacts before cognition latches on. A shiver, a swelling in the chest, a sudden clarity. Physiology testifies that something pre-verbal recognizes the pattern. Neuroscience calls it interoception. Mystics call it gnosis. Either term admits a truth. The message registers in flesh first, intellect second. That somatic flash is your authenticity detector. Keeping a symbol journal sharpens acuity. Write down each pattern, time-stamped with mood and surroundings. Over weeks, clusters appear. Triple numbers on days you practice gratitude, animal symbols during career pivots, electrical anomalies when relationships teeter. The ledger becomes a Rosetta Stone, mapping inner states to outer echoes. Soon you predict which sign will appear before it does. Not prophecy, but pattern literacy. And literacy brings responsibility. When 777 blazes across a stranger's license plate after you've begged the sky for affirmation, you can't shrug it off. Ignoring guidance carries costs. The universe replaces gentle taps with louder knocks. Miss the nudge to rest, and you catch a cold. Miss the cue to leave a toxic office, and watch conflict escalate. Synchronicity reveals road signs, but free will grips the wheel. Cultural lore warns of misreading omens, yet misreading usually stems from desperation. Craving certainty, some people chase numbers like slot machines, mining every clock tick for permission. The dialogue then devolves into paranoia, anxious scanning rather than receptive listening. Healthy engagement resembles conversation with a wise friend. Speak, pause, hear, respond. You don't stalk their every breath. You trust the rhythm. There's also the question of false signals. Algorithms attempt to mimic synchronicity, bombarding you with targeted ads the moment your curiosity spikes. The difference? Natural signs leave you empowered. Artificial ones lure you toward dependency. Pay attention to afterglow. A true symbol fills you with quiet certainty. An ad leaves a hunger that only swiping can numb. That emotional residue tells you whether the message came from universal intelligence or marketing code. Once fluent, you'll notice meta patterns, chains of symbols forming narratives. Perhaps 222 greets you the morning you draft a partnership proposal, 333 the night you refine its vision, and 444 the hour the contract finalizes. The sequence retells your journey in numeric chapters. Or maybe ravens escort you across city limits, clocks freeze at palindromes, and rainbows crown pivotal crossroads. Storybook imagery guiding a real-world plot. The mundane world begins to feel scripted by a benevolent director who respects improvisation. Why would the cosmos bother? Because consciousness is participatory, and symbols are the handshake between subjective and objective realms. When your psyche meets external pattern halfway, reality integrates, coherence blossoms. That coherence is evolution's secret fuel. Organisms survive by detecting reliable signals. In humans, signal becomes symbol, and symbol becomes destiny. The more adroitly you translate the cues, the more elegantly you navigate possibilities. Eventually you recognize that symbols don't merely predict reality, they help compose it. Carl Jung called it the psychoid level, a zone where psyche and matter blur. Intend to find a mentor and watch feathers flood your path. The feathers both signal and summons. Reality seems to bend around archetypal imagery because imagery is part of reality's code. Change the iconography in your inner cinema and the outer scenery rearranges to match. That's why ritual works. Lighting a candle, chanting a mantra, arranging a workspace in sacred geometry, all broadcast a message in the universe's native tongue. You become an active coder in the cosmic mainframe. Numbers echo back, confirming lines compiled successfully. Fail to respect the craft and feedback garbles. And yet the system that taught you to ignore coincidence labels this practice superstition. It prefers citizens who rely on official translators, markets predicting trends, pundits interpreting events. Translate your own life and middlemen lose relevance. That's subversive. Symbol literacy is spiritual sovereignty. So when 555 interrupts your commute tomorrow, pause the playlist. Breathe. Ask, what upheaval wants entry? If dread coils, maybe it's time to end stagnation. If excitement sparks, brace for adventure. Then act. Call the realtor, update the resume, book the flight. Your move completes the circuit. Keep at it, and ordinary reality recedes like a stage backdrop. You're still paying bills and doing laundry, but every task comes with subtext. The laundromat playlist cycles 888 just as you decide to start a side business. Prosperity looping through dryer doors. The barista scribbles a spiral on your cup when you've journaled about cycles closing. Life becomes a hologram, depth hidden in plain sight. Should you evangelize? Only when invited. Symbols tailor themselves to the receiver's lexicon. Your friend's 1111 might be your sister's dragonfly. Share stories, yes, but let others discover their dictionary. Remember, the universe loves dialects. In the end, numbers and symbols won't steer you for the sake of steering. They seek resonance. Each time you heed them, you realign with a timeline where your inner frequency matches the outer score. The symphony swells, and what began as repeating digits on a cheap digital watch crescendos into an orchestrated life. Conducted by you, composed by all. Reality, you're discovering, is less a railroad and more a river delta, branching, looping, rejoining in ways that would make any cartographer weep. You grew up believing that time was a single track of steel stretching from birth to death, events clicking forward like boxcars. Yet the moment you began conversing with synchronicity, the track dissolved in a shimmering water, and choices became oars. Each thought, yes or no, nudges the current, sliding you toward a slightly different bank. You don't notice the shift at first. The scenery still looks familiar. But tilt your attention and you'll spot landmarks that weren't there yesterday, relationships that feel inevitable yet brand new, opportunities that appear as if summoned by backstage crew. Quantum physics offered the first scientific confession that life might fork in real time. In the double-slit experiment, particles behave like possibilities until an observer forces a decision. Scale that idea up, and every crossroads in your life is a living double-slit. Watch closely, and the outcome freezes. Look away, and the story fans into probabilities. Synchronicity is the universe tapping your shoulder at the split second when observation counts most, whispering, choose here. That whisper often arrives as the repeating number, the overheard lyric, the inexplicable detour. Small signals with colossal leverage. Picture the afternoon, you almost skipped a coffee run. A sudden urge, impossible to rationalize, pushed you out the door. On the sidewalk, you bumped into an acquaintance who mentioned a job opening that matched your secret wish list. One minor decision shifted your professional river 10 degrees, and 5 years later, you're living in a city you never visited. The timeline where you ignored the urge still exists in potential, flowing parallel, but you no longer inhabit it. The coffee nudge was a junction. Taking it launched you in a timeline B. These junctions aren't rare. They arrive countless times a day. Most feel trivial. Left or right lane, cook or order in, answer or ignore the text. Yet each micro-choice adjusts trajectory by fractions that compound over weeks into wholly different futures. Synchronicity serves as your navigation app in this multidimensional terrain. Unlike GPS, which locates you on a single map, Synchronicity senses the web of possible maps and highlights the one where your deepest intent can unfurl. That's why the cues feel personal. They're responding to unspoken desires nested beneath conscious thought. Consider the phenomenon of déjà vu. Not the foggy kind that evaporates, but the crystalline hit that stops you mid-stride. Neurologists chalk it up to neural misfires. But what if it's resonance between present self and a neighboring timeline where this moment happened first? The flash of familiarity might be your multidimensional self yelling through thin walls. You've reached a checkpoint. Keep going. Directly afterwards, synchronicities often cascade. A stranger quotes the very phrase you were pondering. The traffic light stays green all the way home. An email arrives time-stamped 11:11. Reality rewards alignment with flow by smoothing logistics, as though the universe rolls out cosmic bubble wrap to protect cargo marked on purpose. Timelines aren't merely personal. They braid into collective currents. History books teach singular narratives. World War ended, technology emerged, cultures collided. But beneath headlines, probability threads shimmer, and collective choice nudges humanity toward darker or brighter versions of tomorrow. Mass synchronicities, Mandela effect memories, worldwide 11/11 sightings, viral dreams of shared symbols. Hint that societies, too, pivot between branches. When millions attune to the same pattern, a dormant timeline flexes its muscles. That's why oppressive systems scramble to saturate consciousness with fear. Terror fixes attention on fixed, bleak outcomes, collapsing possibilities into predictable ruts. Serenity, curiosity, and awe do the opposite. They loosen the weave so brighter strands can surface. You've likely witnessed timeline fluidity in your own circle. One friend embraces her nudge to study herbal medicine, and within months you notice your social feed filling with holistic retreats, sustainable farms, scientific articles validating ancient plants. Her personal pivot pulls informational tributaries in a shared space, and those tributaries carry chances for others to hop rivers too. Synchronicity acts as a recruitment officer for parallel realities, enrolling one participant at a time until critical mass tips the collective boat. Navigating this multiverse demands more than wishful thinking. It requires clarity of signal. Your emotional state is the broadcast tower. Fear emits static, fuzzing guidance, so signs arrive garbled or late. Gratitude, presence, and embodied excitement sharpen transmission. Think of your body as the cockpit instrument panel. Heart rate, gut tension, breath depth, all needles indicating alignment. A yes timeline feels expansive in the chest and loose behind the eyes. A no timeline constricts throat, knuckles jaw. Numbers and symbols confirm what physiology already whispered. Yet misunderstanding arises when people chase the symbol rather than the state. Suppose 888 keeps appearing when you feel creative. The numbers aren't magic lottery tickets, they're mirrors. Nurture the creativity and 888 persists. Seek 888 without cultivating the state, and the mirror goes blank. Timelines respond to vibrational authenticity, not scavenger hunts. What about so-called negative synchronicities? Car breakdowns, missed flights, repeating numbers that accompany dread. They, too, are guideposts, signaling divergence from optimal flow. If 666 shadows a project that feels ethically murky, perhaps the message is to recalibrate material motives. Course correct, and the ominous pattern evaporates. In this way, the universe doesn't punish. It provides real-time telemetry. You wouldn't curse a car dashboard for flashing low fuel. You'd refuel. Treat disturbing synchronicities the same. Adjust, refuel, realign. Time loops sometimes accompany pivotal junctions. You catch yourself reliving conversations, crossing identical streets, meeting clones of earlier partners. These echoes can feel eerie, but they reveal where you're cycling until a lesson lands. Break the loop by making an uncharacteristic choice. Speak truth instead of politeness. Take the side road instead of the freeway. Synchronicity will usually applaud with an unmistakable wink, perhaps 1234, the forward march sequence, confirming you exited the roundabout. Can timeline hopping be trained? Yes, through intention rituals. Each morning declare, I align with the highest timeline available today, one of growth, contribution, and wonder. Then act as if that timeline already surrounds you. This primes perception to notice the breadcrumb trail. The universe, hearing a clear request, accelerates delivery of matching clues. Over weeks, life rearranges. Serendipitous mentors appear. Health improves. Finances stabilize. Not by magic wands, but by thousands of micro-choices guided by nudges you finally trust. You might wonder if free will survive in a universe of suggested routes. It thrives. The universe proposes, you dispose. Ignoring a sign isn't punished, but it redirects you down roads that may be bumpier, slower, more redundant. Many people stay on those detours for decades, convinced fate is cruel. Fate was never the driver. Fate was the road atlas sliding across the dashboard. Pick it up, and forks in the road glow like neon. Eventually, you'll gain enough altitude to view multiple personal timelines at once, the way hikers glimpse converging rivers from mountain ridge. Meditation, lucid dreaming, breath work, and psychedelics can widen that vantage. Some explorers report meeting alternate selves who chose differently, stayed in the marriage, took the scholarship, said no to the flight. Contact leaves you humbled and motivated. Every version of you is working out the puzzle with the tools available. The synchronicities you obey today might echo as whispered guidance in their realities, because consciousness is non-local. Insights leak across dimensions like fragrance through adjoining rooms. The deeper you travel, the more reverence you cultivate for choice itself. You stop asking whether a decision is right or wrong and start asking which timeline it opens. Release the pressure of perfection. Adopt the curiosity of exploration. When the universe sends a nudge and you hesitate, remember, the cost isn't failure, it's forfeiting a corridor of potential wonders. The cosmos will still love you, but the version of you surfing those wonders will have to wait in the wings. Perhaps the most radical revelation is this: timeline shifts are reversible. If you miss a cue, another arises. If you ignore symbols for months, the field generates a louder invitation, sometimes disguised as crisis. Accidents, layoffs, breakups often jolt sleepers onto fresh paths. It's messy grace, but grace nonetheless. Life is less concerned with punishing than with evolving, and evolution is generous with second chances. On this ever-branching river, mastery isn't predicting every fork. It's sensing current changes and steering with minimal drag. You cultivate supple attention, ready to pivot when a dragonfly lands on your laptop, right as an email pings from an unknown collaborator. That happened because the timelines converged, and you were present enough to notice. One phone call later, your side project leaps months ahead. Coincidence? In linear reality, maybe. In river space, it's hydrodynamics. As timeline fluency grows, fear shrinks. You realize there is always another branch, another solution, another window. Scarcity belongs to straight-track thinking. Delta thinking reveals plenitude. If one channel silts up, flow simply diverts. This resilience terrifies institutions built on scarcity myths. A populace confident in infinite options is hard to corral. They walk through locked gates because a synchronicity flashed the skeleton key code. That, more than anything, explains the centuries-long campaign to brand such navigation as folly. Yet the campaign is failing. Millions feel the current shift beneath their kayaks, see new shores glinting in peripheral vision, hear birdsong from forests that weren't on last year's map. And every time you trust a whisper, you add momentum to that collective turn. You become both traveler and tide, steering not only your vessel, but the larger flotilla of humankind toward timelines where creativity outranks control. That possibility sends a thrill up the spine of the universe itself, because the universe adores co-creation. So in the next unlikely alignment sparks, a license plate spelling your childhood nickname moments before a pivotal interview, smile and paddle. The river just opened a brighter tributary. Slide in, feel the acceleration, and remember, the map was never flat. It was fractal. And you, intrepid navigator, were born with a compass already beating in your chest. The moment you sense timelines flex, another question surfaces. What lets pure awareness bend physical events? The answer isn't hiding in mystic scrolls. It's scattered through peer-reviewed papers, declassified memos, and clinical oddities that mainstream outlets glaze over. Piece them together, and a simple truth emerges. Consciousness is an active ingredient in the recipe of matter, and powerful interests have every reason to keep that fact blurry. Medicine offers the loudest clue. The placebo effect, portrayed as statistical static, regularly produces recovery rates that dwarf some licensed drugs. Belief alone shrinks tumors, calms blood pressure, ends migraines. Every double-blind trial that subtracts placebo responders quietly proves mind over molecules, yet journals file the result under nuisance variable because admitting it would slash billions from pharmaceutical forecasts. In physics, the double-slit experiment refuses to stay in a quantum basement. When researchers at Princeton's Pear Lab aimed focused intention at random event generators, the output drifted beyond chance, tiny but cumulative. Similar studies now span 30 nations, all hinting that consciousness nudges probability the way wind curves smoke. Military agencies noticed. Project Stargate, the CIA's remote viewing program, ran for 2 decades, mapping Soviet sites through clairvoyance. Official briefings later leaked to journalists painted a stranger picture. Analysts recorded sessions where viewers sketched Soviet submarine bays with enough accuracy for naval officers to update charts. Why the hush? 3 motives echo through boardrooms and lecture halls. Control. A public that knows attention shapes outcomes becomes hard to herd with fear or advertising. Profit. Industries selling external fixes, from opioids to fast fashion, depend on consumers who doubt internal power. Credibility. Academia stakes prestige on materialism. Grants vanish when professors chase anomalies. Yet data keeps leaking. HeartMath measures cardiac coherence, projecting several feet beyond skin, synchronizing nearby brains. German hospitals use virtual reality placebo surgeries to cut pain by 40%. A 2024 study in Nature Human Behavior showed mere expectation sharpening eyesight without drugs or lenses. Mechanisms may involve biophotons, microtubule quantum states, or field we haven't named, but the effect is measurable. Step outside medicine into material science. At the University of Sao Paulo, fermented cultures exposed to compassion meditation showed altered protein folding. Engineers in California coat thin water films on silicon, freeze them after intention sessions, then scan the fractals. Patterns differ from controls with statistical heft. Consciousness is leaving fingerprints on circuits. Skeptics cite replication failures, forgetting consciousness isn't a reagent you store at room temperature. It fluctuates with fatigue, sincerity, emotional congruence. Expecting linear repeatability from a nonlinear sentient field is like measuring violin tone with a speedometer. Resonance, not brute force, is the instrument. That truth alone threatens the reductionist empire. Language policing helps. Terms like pseudoscience lump cold-reading tricks with peer-reviewed mind matter work, letting skeptics dismiss the lot in one swipe. Meanwhile, when Fortune 500 executives use creative visualization, nobody sneers. They win innovation awards. Suppression isn't a conspiracy meeting in smoke-filled rooms. It's an ecosystem of incentives protecting the story that keeps profits predictable. The economic stake is massive. If focused awareness can subtly shift entropy, future power grids might integrate consciousness modulation for efficiency. Utilities would prefer to own that lever, not watch citizens' self-organized meditation flash mobs that trim peak load for free. Sports hint at the frontier. Olympic shooters practice quiet eye drills. EEGs show alpha waves synchronized just before trigger pull, tightening shot spread. Commentators call it flow, but data reads like localized reality sculpting. Translate that to markets, medicine, or diplomacy, and the potential dwarf skyscrapers. Your private life feels shifts first. Rooms thicken when someone sulks, lighten when laughter erupts. Instruments detect micro changes in air ionization during emotional spikes. You are already a tuning fork. The question is whether you play intentionally. Centered presence calms toddlers, steadies meetings, routes timelines. To test the science at home, adopt a 3-step protocol. Coherence. 5 minutes of heart-focused breathing synchronizes nervous system rhythms. Intention framing. Phrase the desired shift vividly. My 2 p.m. meeting flows with clarity. Release. Let it go. Clinging collapses the wave prematurely. Watch for feedback. Numbers, lyrics, sudden ease. Log results. Patterns emerge within weeks. Even tiny experiments erode suppression. Share logs in trusted circles. Replication snowballs like citizen astronomers once mapping comets before institutional telescopes could. By the time universities rebrand these findings as emergent complexity studies, you'll have lived the upgrade for years. Project Stargate didn't end because results were nil. It ended because auditors worried about optics. Internal memos released under FOIA admit viewers provided actionable intelligence of high reliability. Similar programs sprang up from Moscow to Beijing, all cloaked as psychological research. When evidence threatens national monopolies on power, it migrates into vaults and reappears decades later with black ink through half the paragraphs. Parallel civilian projects gathered global data. Roger Nelson's Global Consciousness Project planted random number generators on 6 continents. During emotionally charged events, New Year's Eve, royal weddings, terrorist attacks, the machines drifted from randomness in synchrony, as though human attention braided an invisible net across oceans. Critics waved off statistical flukes, yet 200 separate spikes keep stacking peer-reviewed odds of billions to 1. Consider epigenetics, once fringe, now textbook. Thoughts and environment flip gene switches within minutes. Bruce Lipton's early work was mocked, but by 2025 thousands of papers confirm methyl groups dance to the tune of perception. If belief scribbles on DNA, why doubt it nudges traffic lights or job offers? Pilot test the claim yourself. Spend 10 minutes nightly flooding gratitude toward tomorrow's commute. Track travel time against baseline. If nothing shifts, scrap the model. But if lights stay green, conversations flow, parking appears, iterate. Science is iteration. You're scientist and subject in one. Copywriters now slip quantum buzzwords into skincare ads. That's your cue the dam is cracking. Whenever commerce co-opts vocabulary, paradigm shift lies upstream. For a while the market will peddle consciousness-infused beverages, but beneath gimmicks people will learn the core hack. State first, matter second. Critics fear magical thinking, yet responsibility actually rises. If thoughts steer probability, harmful rumination becomes causal littering. Communities will need mental hygiene rituals the way cities manage waste. Simple coherence before council meetings could replace metal detectors, cheaper and more effective. Textbooks have begun to pivot, sneaking in clauses like consciousness may play a non-trivial role at quantum scales. That's the white flag before the parade. Once glossaries shift, lectures follow. Paradigms don't collapse by debate. They fade when a generation grows fluent in the new grammar. So the next time 1111 flashes while you cradle a daring idea, treat it as a lab alarm. Breathe coherence into the vision, act, and watch reality send a read receipt. You're not just decoding signs, you're co-authoring physics. The suppressed science of consciousness isn't tomorrow's tech. It's a feature already live in the human OS, waiting for users bold enough to click Update. A single flute can pierce a marching band if it finds the perfect resonance. And that is exactly what happens when one awakened mind walks into a room still echoing with programmed doubt. People feel it before they name it. A hush under the chatter, a gravity that pulls eyes from screens. You say nothing mystical. Maybe you just mention the numbers that chase you all morning, but your calm, matter-of-fact tone breaks the spell of ridicule. Someone at the table exhales a question they've carried for years. Another recalls a coincidence they've buried under laughter. The invisible tuning fork has struck, vibrating spinal columns, rewriting the frequency of the space. This is collective resonance in embryonic form. It scales faster than any broadcast tower. When a critical density of individuals honors the signs, those private ripples converge into standing waves strong enough to shake institutions. You needn't storm gates. You change the pressure inside until the hinges pop on their own. History's revolutions began with pamphlets. The next unfolds through synchronized intuition, millions catching the same nudge, acting in decentralized harmony like starlings in murmuration. Watch how it starts. A tired teacher slips a discussion of Jung into a standardized curriculum. A student electrified opens a forum that becomes a hub for thousands. A coder, clocking 11:11 during a rethink of social algorithms, rewrites the feed to prioritize serendipity over outrage. User stress drops, creativity spikes. A nurse, guided by nocturnal dreams, pioneers a hospital quiet room protocol that halves recovery times. None of them wave banners or quote scriptures. They just trust the pull of alignment and systems bend. Control structures detect the shift through data anomalies, plummeting antidepressant sales, dwindling ad click rates, employee resignations from ethically frail companies. Their response is predictable. Tighten surveillance, amplify noise, but frantic volume only clarifies the contrast. Propaganda feels off-key to ears attuned by synchronicity. Fear campaigns dissolve against the inner certainty that life is conversational, not hostile. You cannot gaslight someone who confirms reality through direct dialogue with the cosmos. As communities link, a shared lexicon emerges without central planning. One region trades crow sightings as storm alerts. Another uses 222 flashes to schedule spontaneous park cleanups. Crowd-funded sensors track coherent heart field spikes during global meditations, mapping real-time weather of human sentiment like satellite clouds. Scientists who once hid fringe interests join open-source projects measuring mind matter effects at festivals, office complexes, refugee camps, anywhere hearts gather. Data sets swell with evidence that harmony isn't poetic. It's kilowatt hours saved, hospital beds emptied, crime heat maps cooling in synchrony with neighborhood drum circles. A tipping point arrives when language shifts. Children no longer ask, was that just luck? But what's the message? Boardrooms replace cost-benefit charts with resonance dashboards. Governments, those that survive, pivot from force to facilitation, funding silence gardens as eagerly as highways, because civic peace now quantifiably saves GDP. Money itself mutates, currencies backed by collective coherence, rewarding acts that raise communal frequency. Dissenters are welcome. Resonance thrives on diversity. The collective field isn't a choir singing one note, it's jazz. Healthy tension refines patterns, cynics test integrity. The difference is respect. Critique no longer mocks intuition, but challenges it to greater clarity. Debate becomes co-creation, and solutions outrun problems at fractal speed. You might worry this sounds utopian, until you recall how quickly panic once hopped continents. Fear went viral because humans are transmitters. Hope travels the same cables, only faster when unchained from gatekeepers. In 2020, a meme could topple reputations overnight. Imagine what a verified synchronicity swarm, thousands documenting identical dreams before an earthquake, could do for disaster readiness. The infrastructure already exists, intention repurposes it. On the deepest layer, Collective resonance tweaks timelines at planetary scale. Climate feedback loops that once screamed inevitability begin to wiggle as consumption habits pivot en masse, guided not by shaming graphs, but by personal epiphanies that make waste feel as discordant as nails on glass. Forests regenerate, cities green, not through top-down decrees, but through bottom-up aha moments multiplied by billions. Earth itself responds, weather patterns easing as the bioenergetic field steadies, a cosmic exhale. All of this starts with a single yes to the sign on your morning commute. That's the quiet power the system forgot to encrypt. Every micro-act of alignment writes code into the collective source file. You may never meet the farmer who sensed your signal and shifted his crops towards soil-healing rotations, or the policymaker who glimpsed 444 on a late-night document and added a clause protecting wetlands. Yet the lattice of cause threads them to you, each yes amplifying the last in a chain that no algorithm can fully trace. So you keep practicing. You pause before speaking, wait for inner resonance, then proceed. Friends notice their own coincidence rates spike around you. The field is contagious. Soon they practice too. Clusters form, overlap, merge. A network of living nodes blossoms, not on fiber optic lines, but inside the subtle geometry of attention. Old guard institutions, built like pyramids, cannot scale horizontally fast enough to catch the swarm. Governance flips from command to pulse. Sense, sync, respond. In this emerging world, prophecy is obsolete because plastic timelines outpace prediction. Leadership looks like facilitation. Charisma looks like coherence. Artists become infrastructure engineers, codifying beauty as civic protocol. Economists track gross resonant potential. Educators create curriculums where students log synchronicities alongside test scores. The air feels lighter. You breathe deeper without thinking. And if an eclipse darkens hearts, if collective fear surges, the network senses the dip instantly. Ripples of repeating numbers stall, dream data jitters. Within hours, coordinated meditations, concerts, and laughter storms flood the field with counterwaveforms, restoring balance. Crisis management by resonance. No sirens, just a planetary tuning session. The old system's final weapon is ridicule, but mockery ricochets when the mocked are busy generating measurable social good. Columnists who sneer at angel numbers must explain why crime is lowest in districts saturating social feeds with them. Skepticism remains a valued spice, yet its tang now seasons dishes it once spoiled. Here is the quiet climax. You realize control was always an inside job, belief outsourced, authority externalized. Reclaiming that sovereignty at scale flips the planet from hierarchy to holarchy, nested circles of agency humming like planetary gears. And the signs keep flowing, not as crutches, but as playful winks from the universe, celebrating its partnership with a species that finally answered the call. The lights fade, but the music of this conversation lingers. You may close your laptop, step into fluorescent corridors, scroll tomorrow's headlines, yet the field we've traced together is already awake inside you. Notice how the room feels wider, how the hum of the refrigerator sounds almost like drums. That's awareness stretching its limbs after a long sleep. Tonight, do nothing extraordinary. Pour tea, brush your teeth, stand barefoot on a patch of floor you've crossed 1,000 times. Breathe once for your childhood self who saw magic, once for the years you doubted, once for the timelines now blooming at the edge of vision. Let the exhale carry a simple permission. I'm willing to listen. If a number glows on a microwave clock, jot it down. If a lyric catches your ear while you rinse dishes, hum it aloud. Tiny acts anchor vast realities. The universe needs only a crack to flood your life with dialogue. And should doubt tap your shoulder, thank it. It kept you sharp enough to discern signal from noise. Invite it to ride shotgun while you steer. Beyond your walls, other listeners are tuning in. Somewhere a designer sketches symbols into city benches. A commuter skips the usual exit. A grandmother smiles at a crow on her sill. All part of the same slow choreography. You don't have to orchestrate it. Harmony is the default once interference drops. When you drift to sleep, imagine Earth as a heartbeat in cosmic darkness, pulsing with billions of subtle yes. Hear your own pulse answer. 2. Rhythms merge, and the night air thickens with possibility. This is not the end of the story. It's intermission. The next act begins at first light, when a seemingly ordinary moment winks, and you, now fluent, wink back.